Jason had been traveling for weeks, crossing the vast barren landscapes of a planet he had never heard of. The journey had drained him both physically and mentally. The scorching sun and unending winds seemed to have no mercy, but Jason's determination to find the ancient artifact kept him going. It was said to hold unimaginable power, enough to change the course of history. That was what he had been told when he first heard the whispers of its existence, and now, standing on the outskirts of an alien city, he was closer than ever. The city was a strange mix of futuristic technology and ancient architecture. The buildings were tall and twisted, as if the structures themselves had been grown from the planet's soil. Despite the unfamiliarity of it all, Jason felt oddly at peace. There was something about the place that felt alive, as though the city itself was aware of his presence. He walked through the narrow streets, trying to ignore the strange stares he received from the locals. Most of them were humanoid, though their features were slightly different from humans. Their skin ranged from shades of blue and green to pale, almost translucent hues. Some had 2 sets of eyes, while others had elongated limbs or multiple fingers on each hand. But Jason knew that they all shared one thing in common. They were different. It didn't take long before he encountered someone who wasn't quite like the others. She was standing outside a small, dimly lit building, her presence commanding the attention of everyone around her. Her name was Talia, and from the moment Jason laid eyes on her, he knew she wasn't like the rest. She had an aura of mystery, something both alluring and intimidating. Her golden eyes sparkled like twin suns, and her long silver hair cascaded down her back in waves. She was stunning, a sight Jason wouldn't forget even if he tried. Talia noticed him immediately, her gaze piercing through him as if she could see straight into his soul. She didn't say a word but merely stepped aside, gesturing for him to enter the building. Jason, despite the curiosity burning inside him, hesitated. He had been warned about the dangers of getting too close to the natives of this planet. But something about Talia made him forget those warnings, and without another thought he followed her inside. The room was dimly lit, with strange symbols glowing faintly on the walls. There were tables covered with mysterious objects, artifacts, scrolls, and vials filled with glowing liquids. Jason's eyes darted around the room, trying to take in everything at once. But it was the object at the center of the room that caught his attention. It was a small ornate bottle filled with a liquid that shimmered like liquid silver. Talia walked over to the table, her every movement graceful and deliberate. She picked up the bottle and turned to Jason. "You seek power. Human?" she asked, her voice low and melodic. Jason didn't answer immediately. He had heard stories of people who sought power and lost everything in the process. But this was different. He wasn't searching for wealth or control. He was searching for something that could change the fate of his people. The artifact he had been chasing for so long was said to be a key to unlocking incredible abilities that could tip the balance in any war. "Yes," Jason finally said, his voice steady. "I need the power to stop something terrible from happening." Talia regarded him for a long moment, her golden eyes studying him with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. "And you would do anything to achieve this?" she asked, her tone both curious and cautionary. Jason nodded. "I will." Talia's lips curved into a faint smile, but it was not one of warmth. "Then you must understand that the price for this power is more than you can imagine," she warned. Jason didn't flinch. He was ready. He had been ready for a long time. He had faced danger before, but this felt different. Talia reached for the bottle, uncorking it with a swift motion. The air around them seemed to hum with energy, and Jason could feel the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. "This drink," Talia began, "will give you the power you seek, but it will change you forever. You will never be human again." Jason didn't hesitate. He stepped forward, his eyes locked onto the shimmering liquid in the bottle. Without a second thought, he grabbed it from Talia's hand and brought it to his lips. Talia's eyes widened in shock, but she didn't stop him. "You are certain?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Jason didn't answer. He tilted the bottle and drank it in one swift motion. The moment the liquid touched his tongue, a surge of energy coursed through him, unlike anything he had ever felt before. His body tingled, his senses heightened to an unimaginable degree. He could hear the faintest of sounds, smell the distinct aromas of the room, and even feel the vibrations of the walls around him. His heart raced, and his head swam with strange visions. Talia stepped back, watching him closely. "Now you have crossed the threshold," she said quietly. "You are no longer fully human. What happens next will depend on how you choose to wield this power." Jason's vision blurred for a moment, and when it cleared, he found himself standing in a completely different place. The room was gone. Instead, he was surrounded by vast landscapes, forests, mountains, oceans, stretching out as far as the eye could see. The world around him was alien, but it felt familiar, like it was part of him. His senses were alive, and the connection he felt with this new world was undeniable. "What did you do to me?" Jason whispered, his voice trembling slightly. Talia's voice echoed in his mind, though her lips didn't move. "You are no longer bound by your human limitations. You have the power to reshape your fate. But be warned, the cost is not yet known." Jason closed his eyes, trying to steady himself. He had made the choice, and now there was no turning back. But what had he truly given up? Was this power worth losing his humanity? Jason's heart pounded as he stumbled forward, disoriented by the flood of sensations that overwhelmed him. The alien world that had appeared before him felt both foreign and oddly familiar, as though it were a place he had known in another life. His breath came in short gasps, his chest rising and falling rapidly as his body reacted to the strange power coursing through his veins. He reached out to steady himself on a nearby rock, his fingers brushing against the cool surface. The rock, however, felt different, softer, almost alive. He could feel a pulse beneath his fingertips, a heartbeat from the stone itself. His eyes widened. It wasn't just his senses that were heightened. The very world around him seemed to respond to his touch. Suddenly, Jason felt a strange pressure in his head, a dull throb that grew stronger with each passing second. His vision blurred again, and when it cleared, the landscape before him had shifted. What was once a vast open plain was now filled with towering trees, their trunks shimmering with iridescent light. The air was thick with the scent of alien flowers, their sweet fragrance filling his nostrils. "This is insane," Jason muttered to himself, his voice shaky. He closed his eyes, trying to calm himself. He had to focus, had to understand what was happening to him. The power inside him was unlike anything he had ever experienced. He was no longer just human. But what did that mean? What did Talia mean when she said he would never be human again? As he struggled to make sense of his new reality, a voice echoed in his mind. It was Talia's voice, but it wasn't coming from any direction, more like a thought, a whisper that seemed to come from everywhere. "You are beginning to understand," she said, her tone calm but filled with an almost playful edge. "The power you have now is vast, but you must learn to control it. It will change you in ways you cannot yet imagine." Jason looked around, trying to locate her. But there was no sign of Talia. Her presence, however, lingered in the air like a distant memory, her voice still clear in his mind. "What have you done to me?" Jason thought, feeling the weight of his question press against his mind. "You drank the elixir," Talia's voice responded, "and with it you have awakened something ancient within you, a connection to this world and to the beings who once roamed it. But you are not the same as they were. You are something new." Jason's mind raced as he tried to process her words. Something ancient? A connection to this world? He had no idea what she was talking about. All he knew was that his body felt different, and the world around him was shifting in strange ways. He could no longer just hear the wind rustling through the trees. He could feel it, feel the movement of every leaf and every gust of air. His senses were sharpened to the point where it felt like he could see the world in layers, each one more vibrant and detailed than before. Jason closed his eyes again, focusing on the strange sensations. He could feel the pulse of the planet, Beneath him, its energy flowing through his body like a river of fire. His skin tingled with the rush of power, and for the briefest moment, he wondered if he was losing himself to it. But just as quickly, the sensation faded. The world around him snapped back into focus, and Jason opened his eyes to find that the landscape had shifted once more. The once peaceful forest was now filled with strange, glowing creatures. Some had wings that shimmered in the light, while others slithered through the air like serpents. Jason instinctively stepped back, startled by the sudden appearance of the creatures. One of the creatures, a small, glowing being no larger than a human child, floated toward him. It hovered just inches from his face, its large, glowing eyes studying him intently. Jason instinctively reached out a hand, but the creature didn't seem frightened. It simply watched him, its light flickering like a star. And then, something extraordinary happened. Without thinking, Jason raised his hand higher, and the creature responded. It hovered toward his fingers, and with a soft hum, it gently landed on his palm. Jason blinked in surprise, his mind struggling to understand how this was happening. The creature felt warm in his hand, its body pulsing with a gentle rhythm. "You're communicating with it," Talia's voice said again, this time with a hint of awe. "You've unlocked the first stage of the power within you. You can now connect with the lifeforms around you. They will respond to your will, just as you have willed them to come to you." Jason was speechless. He had never felt anything like this before. He had never been able to communicate with animals or anything else in such a way. But now, with this tiny creature perched on his hand, he felt a strange sense of connection. It was as if he and the creature were one, bound by an invisible force that only they could understand. The creature chirped softly, and with a quick movement it darted from his hand and disappeared into the trees. Jason watched it go, still trying to wrap his mind around what had just happened. But the strange sensations didn't stop there. His mind was flooded with more visions, more alien landscapes, more creatures, more powers that he could scarcely comprehend. It was like a torrent of images and feelings, each one more intense than the last. His body felt as though it were vibrating with energy, every nerve alive with sensation. Suddenly, Jason felt a sharp pain in his head, as though his very thoughts were being torn apart. He fell to his knees, clutching his temples, the pain unbearable. He could feel the power within him threatening to explode, to consume him entirely. His body trembled, and for the first time since drinking the elixir, Jason was afraid. "Talia," he shouted, though he wasn't sure if the words were spoken aloud or if they were merely thoughts in his mind. The pain worsened, his vision clouding, and he could feel the edges of his humanity slipping away. Was this the price of the power? Was this the cost of crossing the line from human to something else? And then, just as suddenly as it had come, the pain ceased. Jason gasped for air, his body soaked with sweat. He could still feel the power thrumming inside him, but now it was no longer overwhelming. It was more like a part of him, a force he could control. "You are not yet ready to wield this power," Talia's voice echoed in his mind, stern yet gentle. "But you are learning. The more you experience, the more you will understand." Jason slowly rose to his feet, his breath steadying. He felt different, more than just changed, transformed. He was no longer simply human. But what did that mean for him now? What kind of person or being would he become? Jason stood alone in the center of the grand hall, his hands clenched at his sides. The room around him was dimly lit, with tall columns reaching up toward the ceiling, each one etched with ancient symbols. It was a place of power, a place where decisions were made that could shape the fate of entire worlds. And today, those decisions would be made about him. The Alien Council, a group of the most influential leaders of this world, had summoned him. Jason had known this moment was coming, but he had hoped for more time to understand the power coursing through him. His head still throbbed from the strange visions, and his body felt like it was constantly on the edge of something. Something, both terrifying and exhilarating. Across from him stood Talia, her golden eyes cold and unreadable. She had been his guide, his ally in this strange new world. Yet now she was part of this trial, standing by the council, watching him as if he were nothing more than an experiment. The council members were an intimidating presence. Each one was different, with features that defied what Jason thought he understood about life in the universe. Some were humanoid, but with dark black scales covering their skin. Others had 6 arms and large insect-like eyes. One was even floating in midair, surrounded by an aura of light, its body translucent and ethereal. The leader of the council, a tall alien with long, flowing tentacles and silver skin, stepped forward. His voice echoed in the hall, deep and resonant. "Human, you have chosen to drink the elixir," he said, his eyes glowing with a strange, otherworldly light. "You have given up your humanity, and in doing so, you have entered a realm from which there is no return. But the question remains, are you worthy of the power you now possess?" Jason swallowed, the weight of the words settling over him. He had come here seeking power, but now, facing the council, he realized just how little he understood. He wasn't sure if he was ready for what lay ahead, but he had no choice but to stand his ground. "I'm ready," he said, his voice steady, though a part of him wasn't so sure. "I didn't drink the elixir for power. I drank it because it's the only way to save my people, my world." The council members exchanged glances, some skeptical, others curious. The leader of the council stepped closer, his voice filled with a quiet authority. "You claim to seek to save your world, but do you understand the true cost of that power? You are no longer human. You are a hybrid, a being who is neither of this world nor the last. You are a bridge between 2 worlds, and bridges are often destroyed when they are tested." Jason felt the weight of the council leader's words sink into his chest. This was not just about power, it was about his very identity. He was no longer just a human, he had crossed a line and there was no going back. But he couldn't afford to doubt himself now. He had made a choice, and that choice had to mean something. "I understand the risks," Jason said, his voice growing stronger. "But I don't have a choice. My people are in danger. If I don't do this, we'll lose everything." The council leader raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued by Jason's resolve. "You are brave, human, but bravery does not always lead to victory. Your connection to this world is still young, fragile. The powers within you are unstable, and you do not yet understand their full potential." Jason could feel the power swirling inside him almost like an untamed beast. The visions, the connection to this world, it all seemed to be just beyond his reach, and yet he couldn't grasp it. It was as if his new abilities were alive, waiting for him to fully unlock them. "I know I'm not ready," Jason admitted, his gaze steady, "but I will learn. I have to." Talia's eyes softened for the briefest moment as she looked at him, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. She stepped forward, addressing the council. "He is right. Jason's transformation is unlike anything we have seen before. His humanity may be gone, but his heart remains strong. He has the potential to be more than just a bridge. He could be the key to uniting our worlds." The council murmured among themselves, their voices low and hesitant. The leader remained silent for a moment, his glowing eyes fixed on Jason. "Very well," the leader said, his tone grave. "You will be tested, human. We will see if you can truly master the power within you. If you succeed, you may have the chance to save your world. If you fail, you will become nothing more than a tool of destruction, and your presence will be erased." Jason felt the weight of the leader's words, but instead of fear, a surge of determination filled him. He had already come this far. He had already made the hardest decision of his life. There was no turning back now. "I accept your challenge," Jason said, his voice unwavering. The council leader nodded, and with a flick of his hand, a large door at the far end of the hall opened, revealing a dark, swirling vortex. The air grew thick with energy, crackling like electricity, and Jason felt an involuntary shiver run down his spine. "This is the trial of unity," the leader explained. "You will enter this portal, and you will face your greatest fears. You will confront your inner darkness and the alien side of yourself that you've become. If you can overcome these trials, you will prove that you are ready for the power you seek. But beware, this trial is not only about strength, it is about understanding. Only those who can embrace both sides of themselves will succeed. Jason took a deep breath, feeling the power inside him swirl with excitement. It was terrifying, but it was also exactly what he needed. To save his world, he had to embrace this new power, even if it meant losing himself in the process. Without looking back, Jason stepped forward and into the vortex, leaving the council behind. As he entered the swirling darkness, he could feel his body pulsing with the energy of the elixir. His mind raced with uncertainty, but deep down he knew this was his only chance. He had to face whatever came next, no matter the cost. The swirling darkness of the vortex closed around Jason like a heavy blanket, swallowing him whole. For a moment he couldn't tell which way was up. His senses were overwhelmed by the intensity of the energy, the raw power that seemed to seep from every corner of the void. He could feel it tugging at his very soul, pulling him in different directions, forcing him to confront parts of himself that he had long buried. Then, with a sudden jolt, the vortex spit him out onto solid ground. Jason stumbled, his legs shaky, as he regained his balance. He looked around, trying to get his bearings, but the world before him was unlike anything he had ever seen. The sky above him was a deep shade of purple, swirling with storm clouds that crackled with energy. The landscape was a chaotic mix of jagged rocks, towering spires, and twisted trees that seemed to grow in impossible angles. The air smelled of something strange, almost like burning metal mixed with the scent of wet earth. It was a world both alien and familiar, like a dream twisted into a nightmare. Jason took a deep breath, steadying himself. He had to focus. This was the trial of unity. He had to face whatever this world threw at him if he was going to succeed. Before him, a figure appeared out of the mist. It was a man, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark eyes that seemed to pierce through Jason's very soul. The man wore tattered armor and had a scar running down his face, but it was the expression in his eyes that sent a chill through Jason. This was no stranger. This was a memory. Father. Jason's voice trembled as he spoke the word that had haunted him for years. The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked at Jason with a mixture of disappointment and anger. "You should have stayed where you belong," he said, his voice harsh. "You left us, you left your people." Jason took a step forward, his heart pounding in his chest. "I didn't leave you. I was forced to go. I had to find a way to save everyone." The man shook his head, the weight of his gaze growing heavier. "You think you can save them? You can barely save yourself. You've become something else, something I don't recognize. You've lost everything that made you human." Jason's breath caught in his throat. The pain in his chest was overwhelming, a sharp ache that felt like it was ripping him apart. His father's words dug into him, each one cutting deeper than the last. He had left Earth in search of something greater, something that could change the fate of his people. But now, standing in this alien world, he began to question everything. Was he still the person he used to be, or had he already lost everything by drinking the elixir? "You're wrong," Jason said, his voice barely a whisper. "I'm still human. I'm doing this for them." The figure of his father stepped forward, his expression growing more intense. "You think power will save you? That this alien power will make you whole again? You're a fool, Jason. You're nothing but a tool, a weapon in their hands. You've already given up your humanity." Jason's hands clenched into fists at his sides. The anger was building inside him, the energy of the elixir surging in his veins. He felt a surge of heat in his chest, his body pulsing with power. He didn't know where it came from, but it was undeniable. The elixir had changed him, yes, but that didn't mean he had lost everything. He wasn't a weapon. He was still Jason. "I haven't lost anything," Jason said, his voice growing stronger. "I'm still me." The world around him seemed to respond to his words. The sky above him flickered, the storm clouds swirling faster as if they were reacting to the energy inside him. The ground beneath his feet trembled, and the air grew thick with tension. The figure of his father looked at him, a faint flicker of doubt in his eyes. "Then prove it," the figure said, his voice a low growl. "Show me that you're still human." Show me that you haven't become just another weapon." With that, the figure lunged at him, drawing a long, jagged sword from his side. Jason's instincts kicked in. He ducked to the side, barely avoiding the blade as it swung past him. He had no training in combat, no experience with weapons, but the power inside him surged again, urging him to act. Without thinking, Jason raised his hand, and the world around him seemed to respond. The ground cracked open, sending a shockwave through the air, and a burst of energy shot from his palm. The figure of his father was thrown back, landing hard against the jagged rocks. For a moment, Jason stood frozen, staring at his outstretched hand. The power he had just unleashed was beyond anything he could have imagined. It felt like the force of 1,000 storms, like the very planet itself had bent to his will. But in that moment, Jason felt something else, the familiar tug of fear. He was no longer sure if he controlled this power or if it controlled him. He had crossed a line, and now there was no going back. The figure of his father stood again, dusting himself off, a look of grim determination on his face. "You've awakened something dangerous inside you, Jason," he said, his voice calmer now. "You're no longer the person you once were. The power you have, it's not yours to control." Jason's heart raced. The figure's words echoed in his mind, and for a moment he felt himself falter. Was the power inside him really a blessing, or was it a curse? Had he truly lost himself in his quest for strength? "You've become something else," the figure continued, stepping forward once again. "The longer you wield this power, the harder it will be to hold on to what you once were. You are at the edge of a rift, Jason, between the world you came from and the one you now belong to." Jason took a deep breath, his hands trembling. He knew the figure's words were true, but he couldn't stop now. He couldn't let the fear take over. He had come this far and there was no turning back. "I'm not going to lose myself," Jason said, his voice steady. "I will control this power. I won't let it control me." The figure of his father paused, then slowly nodded, as if accepting Jason's decision. "Then you must be prepared to face the consequences." With that, the world around Jason began to shift once again. The landscape blurred, and the storm above him raged with even more intensity. Jason felt the rift between his past and his future growing wider. The trial was far from over. But Jason knew one thing for sure. He wasn't going to let fear control him. He was going to fight for what he believed in, even if it meant losing himself in the process. Jason stood in the heart of the alien world, the landscape swirling around him like a fever dream. The rift between his past and his new self had never felt wider, but as the storm above him raged, he couldn't afford to lose focus. The world had shifted, and now, something more dangerous than his internal battle had arrived. The air was thick with the scent of ozone, the sky dark with the approaching storm. A low rumble of thunder echoed through the air as the winds picked up, howling through the jagged spires that surrounded him. The feeling of power within him surged as if it was reacting to the chaos around him. He could feel the energy crackling through his veins, but it wasn't just the power of the elixir this time. There was something else. Something foreign and malicious. A voice broke through the storm, cold and menacing. It echoed through the air, coming from all directions. "So this is the human who dares to challenge the balance of the worlds." Jason's heart skipped a beat as he turned, searching for the source of the voice. He didn't have to look far. Through the storm, a figure emerged from the darkness, stepping into the clearing with a slow, deliberate pace. The figure was tall, draped in dark armor that seemed to absorb the very light around it. A long cloak billowed behind him, and his face was hidden beneath a shadowed hood. Jason instinctively took a step back, the hair on the back of his neck standing on end. There was something about this being that felt wrong. He could feel the malice radiating from the figure like a tangible force. "You are the one who drank the elixir," the figure said, his voice smooth, almost mocking. "The one who believes he can save his world. How quaint." Jason's hand instinctively went to the weapon at his side, but it wasn't a weapon he was used to. His body had changed. He had powers now, abilities that could reshape the very fabric of this world. But even with all that power, something about this figure made him hesitate. "I don't know who you are, but I'm not going to let you stop me," Jason said, his voice firm, though a part of him was unsure. His own power seemed to respond, surging within him, eager to be used. But he didn't know the full extent of it. He wasn't ready for this fight. The figure chuckled, a low, menacing sound. "You're right about one thing. You're not ready for this fight." With a sudden movement, the figure raised his hand and the ground beneath Jason's feet cracked open, sending jagged rocks shooting up toward him. Jason barely had time to react. He leapt back, narrowly avoiding the rocks. As they shot past him, one grazing his arm. Pain flared through him, but it wasn't enough to stop him. His heart pounded and the power inside him surged once again, the world around him blurring as his senses heightened. The figure laughed again, his voice carrying on the wind. "You think you're special, don't you? But you are nothing but a pawn in a much bigger game." Jason's eyes narrowed as he focused on the figure. He could feel the energy in the air, the dark power that this being controlled. This was no ordinary opponent. He had faced challenges before, but this felt different. This wasn't just a test of strength. This was a test of everything he had become. With a fierce yell, Jason raised his hands, focusing all the power inside him. The air around him crackled and a burst of energy shot from his fingertips, aimed straight at the figure. But the being didn't even flinch. With a wave of his hand, the energy was deflected, the blast crashing harmlessly into the ground beside him. "You are too weak," the figure taunted. "The elixir did not make you strong, human. It only gave you a taste of what you could be, what you should have been, but you are not yet worthy." Jason gritted his teeth, frustration building inside him. "I don't need your approval. I don't need anyone's approval. I'm doing this for my people, for my world." The figure's eyes glowed with an eerie light. "Your world is nothing more than a stepping stone. You are nothing more than a tool. And soon, you will learn the truth. The power you seek comes at a price, and it's a price you are not prepared to pay." Jason's mind raced. He had already made the decision to fight for his people, to use the power he had gained. But the words of the figure struck a nerve. What if he was wrong? What if the power inside him was not meant for him to wield? What if he was destined to be nothing more than a pawn in someone else's game? But even as doubt crept into his mind, Jason pushed it aside. He had come too far to turn back now. He had to fight for himself and for those he loved. With a burst of energy, he lunged forward, the ground beneath him shaking as he propelled himself toward the figure. The air crackled with electricity as Jason's energy collided with the dark figure's power. The force of the clash sent shockwaves through the landscape, ripping apart the earth around them. The figure staggered back, clearly surprised by Jason's strength. "You're stronger than I thought," the figure said, his voice laced with both curiosity and anger. "But this is still only the beginning. If you think you've won, you are gravely mistaken." Jason's heart raced as he prepared for the next strike. He could feel the power within him building, ready to explode. But even as he prepared to strike again, the figure raised his hand and muttered a strange incantation. The ground beneath Jason's feet shifted once more, and suddenly, he was surrounded by an army of dark, shadowy figures. They emerged from the very earth, their glowing eyes fixed on him, their forms shifting and writhing like smoke. Jason's breath caught in his throat. These were not ordinary soldiers. They were something much darker, creatures of pure malice. "You will not survive this," the figure said, his voice cold and final. "The power you've embraced will be your undoing." Jason stood tall, the power within him surging, but for the first time, he felt the weight of the battle. He was no longer just fighting for himself. He was fighting for everything he had left, and the stakes had never been higher. The ground trembled beneath Jason's feet as the shadowy army closed in. Dark figures, their eyes glowing with malice, surrounded him on all sides. The storm overhead raged louder, thunder crashing with each passing second. Jason's breath came in quick, sharp gasps as the weight of the situation settled on him. He had faced the unknown, challenged the impossible, but now he stood alone against an overwhelming force. The dark figure, the one who had been manipulating everything from the start, watched from the edge of the chaos, his expression unreadable. "This is the end for you, human," he called out, his voice a cold whisper carried by the wind. "Your power will never be enough. You are nothing more than a fleeting moment, an insignificant player in a much larger game." Jason clenched, his fists, his knuckles turning white as the power inside him surged once more. He had come too far to let fear take hold. He had already crossed the line, left behind the person he once was, and embraced something new. His connection to this alien world, to its power, had transformed him. But was that enough to stop the forces that had gathered against him? "You're wrong," Jason said, his voice steady despite the fear twisting in his gut. "I'm not just a tool. I'm not just some pawn. I'm human, and I will fight for my people." The shadowy army advanced, but Jason wasn't about to back down. He didn't know how much longer he could keep fighting, how much longer he could control the power within him. But he wasn't going to give up. Not now. With a roar, Jason raised his hands, unleashing a burst of energy so powerful that the earth beneath him cracked wide open. The energy shot toward the dark figures, sending them flying back. The power inside him was a storm, a force that seemed to have no end. For a moment, Jason felt invincible, but the dark figure only watched, a faint smirk on his face. "You think you've won," he said. "You are nothing but a child playing with forces you don't understand. The power you've awakened will consume you, Jason. It is not meant for you." Jason felt the words bite deep into his chest, but he refused to let them take root. His mind raced. Was the power inside him really a blessing? Or was it a curse? Every part of him felt it, the strength coursing through his veins, the energy that seemed to shape the very world around him. But the fear, the doubt, was that the price he had to pay? With one final defiant cry, Jason gathered all the power he could summon. The energy exploded from his hands, sending a shockwave through the air, knocking the shadowy figures back even further. But the dark figure was still standing, unaffected by the blast. "You are strong, human," the dark figure said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "But strength alone will not save you. You will learn the price of your actions, Jason. In the end, you will be nothing but a puppet, controlled by the very power you sought to control." Jason's heart raced as he struggled to stay focused. The storm around him seemed to grow louder, more intense, as if the world itself was reacting to the battle. He could feel the power surging within him, but now it felt different. It felt like a force outside of him, something that was pushing him, urging him to embrace it fully. But could he? For the first time since the beginning of this journey, Jason felt doubt creeping in. He had come to this world seeking to save his own, to wield power that could change the course of history. But was he losing himself in the process? Was he already too far gone to return? The shadowy figure advanced, his eyes glowing with dark power. "You have no choice but to embrace it," he said, his voice almost tender. "The power is already inside you. You have already chosen to give up your humanity. There is no going back." Jason's mind raced, the words echoing in his ears. He had crossed that line, yes. But had he truly given up everything? Could he still find a way to use the power without losing himself? Could he find a balance between what he had been and what he was becoming? Then something inside him clicked. It wasn't the power that defined him. It wasn't the abilities that surged through his veins. It was his choice. He had always been human, and he would choose to remain human, even if that meant rejecting the darkness. He could fight for his people, for his world, without sacrificing who he was. With renewed strength, Jason focused on the power inside him. But this time, he controlled it. He did not let it control him. The storm around him began to calm, the wild energy subsiding as he focused his mind. The dark figure faltered, confusion flashing in his eyes. Jason raised his hand once more, but instead of unleashing a destructive blast, he called upon the power to create. The ground beneath him cracked and healed in an instant, a wave of life flowing from him, pushing back the darkness. The shadowy figures recoiled, their forms dissipating as the light from Jason's power pushed them away. The dark figure screamed in rage, but Jason didn't stop. He knew now that he didn't need to destroy everything to win. He just needed to restore balance. You cannot control it like this. The dark figure hissed, his form flickering. As the light grew stronger, "You will lose yourself," Jason didn't respond. Instead, he focused on the power, guiding it, using it to heal the rift between the worlds, to undo the damage that had been done. The storm overhead cleared, the skies turning bright again as the darkness receded. Jason had done it. He had found a way to use the power without losing himself in the process. As the last of the shadowy figures faded, Jason stood tall, the energy around him dissipating. He was exhausted, drained, but victorious. The world around him had shifted, and so had he. But he had chosen to hold on to his humanity, to fight not just for power, but for what was right. The dark figure, now fading into nothingness, hissed one final time. "You may have won today, human, but the battle is far from over. This world will never be the same, and neither will you." Jason took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the battle lift from his shoulders. "I don't need to be the same," he said quietly, looking at the horizon. "I just need to be me."